Wealthy tech CEO's mistress threw shade at a black woman, but the room froze when he kissed her hand. The mahogany conference room gleamed under crystal chandeliers as signatures dried on documents worth more than most people's lifetimes. But all anyone noticed was her brown skin and assumed she was there to empty the trash. Talia Monroe had spent 18 months building the legal fortress that protected Kinder Voss's tech empire from a discrimination lawsuit. 18 months of 14-hour days, weekend research sessions, and strategy meetings that stretched past midnight. Tonight, the case was officially closed. Victory tasted like cold coffee and exhaustion. Have you ever watched someone's world change with a single gesture? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. He kissed her hand in front of 300 witnesses, cameras flashing like lightning, while his ex-mistress watched in horror. What they didn't know was that this brilliant black lawyer had been rejecting his advances for months, refusing to be anyone's secret. Tonight wasn't about romance. It was about public vindication for the woman who saved his empire while everyone assumed she was the help. Have you ever watched someone's world change with a single gesture? Have you ever been invisible in a room full of people who should know your name? Been mistaken for staff when you're actually the boss? Tonight, one man decided that love without respect is just possession in disguise. But what happens when going public changes everything, including the very foundation of what brought them together? Hit that subscribe button because this story proves that sometimes the most powerful love stories start with the most devastating rejection. Let me take you back to the moment Talia Monroe first walked into Kinder Voss's world and why she almost walked right back out. She saved $1 billion company on a Tuesday and was mistaken for the cleaning lady on Wednesday. That's when Talia Monroe decided some battles are worth fighting in public. The mahogany conference room gleamed under crystal chandeliers as signatures dried on documents worth more than most people's lifetimes. But all anyone noticed was her brown skin and assumed she was there to empty the trash. Talia Monroe had spent 18 months building the legal fortress that protected Kinder Voss's tech empire from a discrimination lawsuit. 18 months of 14-hour days, weekend research sessions, and strategy meetings that stretched past midnight. Tonight, the case was officially closed. Victory tasted like cold coffee and exhaustion. Excellent work, everyone, announced James Hartford, the senior partner whose signature looked like chicken scratch but carried the weight of Wall Street. His eyes swept the room, landing on every face except hers. This team really pulled through. Talia felt the familiar burn in her chest. She'd written 70% of the brief, found the loopholes, built the arguments that saved Voss Industries from paying out $40 million in damages. But Hartford spoke like she wasn't even there. The celebration started with champagne that cost more than her monthly rent. Partners and associates mingled, ties loosened, laughter echoing off wood-paneled walls. Talia stood near the window, nursing her glass and watching the city lights below. Manhattan never slept, but tonight she felt bone-deep tired. "Excuse me, miss." The voice belonged to Patricia Hartford, James's wife. Blonde hair pulled into a perfect chignon, pearls that probably had their own insurance policy. "Could you refresh the ice bucket? The champagne is getting warm." The room went quiet. Not dead silent, but that particular hush that comes when everyone pretends not to notice something awful happening. Talia turned slowly. "I'm sorry, what?" "The ice," Patricia repeated, gesturing toward the champagne service. "And maybe check on the appetizers? I think they need refilling." Heat crawled up Talia's neck. She'd been in rooms like this before. Rooms where her degrees from Harvard Law meant nothing. Where her expertise was invisible. Where 3 decades of fighting for respect could vanish with one casual assumption. "I'm not the help," Talia said quietly. "I'm the attorney who just saved your husband's biggest client $40 million. Patricia's face went pink, then red. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I just thought." "You thought what exactly?" The words came out sharper than Talia intended, but she was done swallowing her pride for other people's comfort. The room had gone completely silent now. Partners watched over their champagne glasses. Associates studied their phones. Even the actual waitstaff had stopped moving. James Hartford appeared beside his wife. Damage control mode activated. "Talia, please, Patricia didn't mean anything by it. You know how these events can be. Lots of faces, easy to get confused. Easy to get confused. Like her Harvard law degree was invisible. Like her name wasn't on every document in the case file. Like she hadn't been introduced to Patricia twice at previous firm events." "Of course," Talia said, her voice steady as steel. "Perfectly understandable mistake." She set her champagne glass on the nearest table and walked toward the elevator. Her heels clicked against marble floors that cost more than most people's cars. Behind her, conversations resumed in hushed tones. Back in her office, Talia pulled out her phone and Googled Kendrick Voss. She'd studied his company for months, knew his business model better than he probably did, but she'd never really looked at the man himself. The search results showed a face that belonged on magazine covers. Sharp jaw, dark hair, eyes that seemed to see straight through the camera. Forbes called him a visionary. Wall Street Journal dubbed him the most eligible bachelor in tech. The most eligible bachelor. She scrolled through images of him at galas, charity events, business conferences. Always with a woman. Always the same type of woman. Blonde. Thin. The kind of beautiful that came with trust funds and finishing schools. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. "Mr. Voss called. Says he owes you everything. Wants to meet tomorrow. Should I schedule?" Talia stared at the message. She'd spent months protecting a man she'd never met, building legal walls around his empire while everyone else got the credit. Now he wanted to thank her personally. She thought about Patricia Hartford's assumption, about being invisible in her own victory, about champagne glasses and crystal chandeliers, and rooms full of people who would never see her as anything more than a help. How many times have you been the smartest person in a room, but treated like you don't belong? Drop a comment if you've ever had your expertise questioned because of how you look. Her fingers hovered over her phone keyboard. She could ignore the message, keep things professional, maintain the distance that had protected her for 33 years. Instead, she typed, "Schedule it. Conference room B, 1 hour maximum." The next morning, her secretary buzzed with urgency. "Ms. Monroe, there's a Kendrick Voss on line 1. He says he owes you everything." She stared at the phone, heart racing. She'd studied him for months preparing his case, but they'd never actually spoken. His voice would change everything. His voice was whiskey and smoke over the phone. Dangerous for a woman who'd spent 33 years being professionally bulletproof. "Ms. Monroe." The way he said her name made her forget she was sitting in a sterile office building. Deep, measured, like he was tasting each syllable before he spoke it. "Understand I owe you an apology and a debt I can never repay." Talia gripped the phone tighter. "Just doing my job, Mr. Voss." "Your job." He chuckled, and the sound went straight through her. "Your job was to review contracts and file motions. What you did was save my company from complete destruction. There's a difference." She'd read every article about the discrimination case. Former employee claiming Voss Industries passed her over for promotions because of her race. The woman had emails, witness statements, a paper trail that could have buried Kendrick's company. But Talia had found the inconsistencies, the timeline gaps, the evidence that told a different story. "The case had holes," Talia said. "I just found them. You found what 12 other attorneys missed. You built a defense that didn't just win, it exposed the truth. That former employee was stealing proprietary information and selling it to our competitors. When we caught her, she decided to play the victim." Talia had suspected as much, but hearing him confirm it made her chest tight with satisfaction. Justice felt good, even when nobody noticed who delivered it. "I don't usually make personal calls to my legal team," Kendrick continued. "But you're not usual, are you, Ms. Monroe?" "I'm thorough, Mr. Voss. Nothing more, nothing less." "Thorough." Another chuckle. "Is that what we're calling it? I've been in business for 15 years. I worked with law firms that charge more per hour than most people make in a month. None of them saw what you saw. None of them cared enough to dig deeper." Her Detroit apartment felt smaller as his voice filled the space through her phone, deep and measured, carrying the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. She could picture him in some glass tower office, cities spread out below him like a kingdom he'd conquered. "I'd like to meet in person," he said. "Properly thank you for what you've done." The offer hung in the air between them. Talia closed her eyes and saw Patricia Hartford's shocked face. The way the whole room had watched her humiliation like entertainment. She thought about Kendrick's dating history, a parade of women who looked nothing like her. "That's not necessary, Mr. Voss. Maybe not necessary, but I'd like to anyway." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "I've been reading your other cases. Your work on housing discrimination, the pro bono employment suits. You don't just practice law, Ms. Monroe. You fight for people who can't fight for themselves." Heat crawled up her neck. She hadn't expected him to research her. Hadn't expected him to see past the case files to the person behind them. "I believe in justice," she said simply. "So do I, which is why I'd like to discuss something with you. A proposition that might interest you." "What kind of proposition?" "The kind better discussed over dinner than over the phone." There it was. The invitation she'd been expecting and dreading. Dinner meant personal. Dinner meant crossing lines she'd spent her career drawing in permanent ink. "I don't date clients, Mr. Voss." The silence stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. "Then, what if I wasn't your client anymore?" Her heart did something complicated in her chest. "Excuse me, the case is closed. My company is safe. Technically, I'm not your client anymore." She could hear the smile in his voice. "So what do you say? Dinner? Somewhere public, completely professional. Just two people having a conversation about justice and maybe changing the world." Talia stared out her apartment window at Brooklyn stretching toward Manhattan, at the city that had promised her everything and delivered just enough to keep her hungry. She thought about voices like whiskey and men who noticed her work when her own bosses didn't. "Coffee," she heard herself say. "Public place. 1 hour. Coffee it is." The satisfaction in his voice was unmistakable. "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, there's a place in Brooklyn Heights called Groundswell. Good coffee, better conversation." After he hung up, Talia sat staring at her phone. She Googled him again, this time paying attention to the women in the photos. Sloan Winters appeared in dozens of images. Fashion executive, Upper East Side princess, the kind of blonde that made other women feel invisible. Have you ever felt an instant connection with someone you knew was wrong for you? When your brain says no, but your body says maybe. Tell me about it in the comments. She set her phone aside and tried to focus on case files. But his voice kept echoing in her head. The way he'd said her name, like it mattered. Like she mattered. When he suggested dinner to properly thank her, she almost said yes. Almost. Instead, she heard herself say, "I don't date clients, Mr. Voss." The silence stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. "Then, what if I wasn't your client anymore?" She agreed to coffee because coffee was safe, until she saw him in person and realized safety was no longer an option. The Brooklyn coffee shop buzzed with afternoon energy, but when Kendra Voss walked through the door, 6 feet of tailored perfection and focused intensity, every conversation paused. Talia watched from her corner table as heads turned. Phones appeared, whispers started. He moved through the attention like he was used to it, scanning the room until his eyes found hers. The photos hadn't done him justice. In person, he was devastating. Dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, a suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary, and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. When he smiled at her, she forgot how to breathe properly. "Ms. Monroe." He extended his hand as he reached her table. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." His handshake was firm, warm, lasting just a second longer than professional. She felt the contact everywhere, like her body had been waiting for his touch without her permission. "Mr. Voss." She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Please sit." He settled into the chair with easy confidence, but she caught him glancing around the coffee shop with something like wonder. "I haven't been in a place like this in years," he admitted. "All the coffee shops near my office are either Starbucks or places that charge $20 for foam art." "Welcome to Brooklyn," Talia said, "where coffee is still coffee and nobody cares if you're famous." "Is that what I am? Famous?" She raised an eyebrow. "Forbes cover, Wall Street Journal profiles. You tell me." He laughed, and the sound made her stomach flip. "Fair point. Though I suspect you're more impressive than anyone gives you credit for. Harvard Law Review, right? Top of your class. Heat crept up her neck. You researched me. I told you I did. Your housing discrimination case in Queens, brilliant work. You didn't just win, you set precedent. Made it harder for landlords to hide behind credit requirements when they're really practicing racial discrimination. She studied his face, looking for the catch. Men like Kendra Voss didn't usually know about housing discrimination cases in Queens. It definitely didn't call them brilliant. Why, she asked. Why what? Why do you care about housing discrimination in Queens? About employment lawsuits in the Bronx? You live in a different world than the people I represent. His expression grew serious. You assume I've always lived in glass towers and private jets. Haven't you? My mother cleaned office buildings in Detroit until I was 15. Worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table. I know what it feels like to be invisible to people who should see you. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. She'd spent months researching his company, his business practices, his dating life. But she'd never looked into his background, never thought to wonder where he came from. Detroit, she said quietly. Born and raised. Moved to New York when I got my first tech job, but I remember what it was like before. I remember being hungry. I remember my mother coming home with stories about executives who treated her like furniture. Something shifted in her chest. The man across from her wasn't just another rich boy playing with daddy's money. He'd climbed out of the same neighborhoods she'd grown up in. He understood. So when I see someone like you, he continued, someone who could make millions in corporate law, but chooses to fight for people who can't afford justice, that matters to me. That's the kind of person I want in my corner. Your corner for what? I'm starting a foundation. Tech access for underserved communities. Legal aid for people who can't afford it. Real change, not just tax write-offs and photo opportunities. His eyes locked on hers. I need someone who understands a fight. Someone who won't let me lose sight of why it matters. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. But Talia had learned not to trust things that seemed too good to be true. And in exchange, you get resources to do the work you're already doing, but on a scale that could actually move the needle. Plus a salary that reflects your worth instead of what some law firm thinks they can get away with paying you. She leaned back in her chair, studying him. You know what I make? I can guess. And I know it's not enough. His voice dropped lower, more intense. I've read about your dating history, Mr. Voss. I'm not blonde, I'm not from the Upper East Side, and I'm not interested in being your experiment in diversity. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she was tired of pretending. Tired of wondering if interest in her work was really interest in something else. Kendrick's face went still. For a moment, she thought she'd offended him. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table. And when he spoke, his voice was deadly serious. Let me be clear about something, Ms. Monroe. I didn't ask you here because I collect brilliant black women like trophies. I asked you here because you're the smartest attorney I've ever worked with, and I want to change the world. The fact that I find you attractive is secondary to the fact that I respect the hell out of you. Her heart hammered against her ribs. You find me attractive? I'd have to be blind not to. But that's not why we're sitting here. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his interest was professional, that his foundation was real, that she wasn't just another conquest for a man who'd never been told no. I need time to think about it, she said. Of course. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. My personal number, not for business, for when you want to ask me questions that can't wait for office hours. As he stood to leave, the afternoon sun caught the angles of his face, and she felt something dangerous stirring in her chest. Want? The kind that made smart women make stupid decisions. Would you turn down someone who could change your life if you knew you'd never be their first choice? Share your thoughts below. As he walked her to her car, rain started falling. When he offered his jacket, she shook her head. I'm not fragile, Mr. Voss. His response stopped her cold. I know. That's why I can't stop thinking about you. Before she could respond, her phone rang, another crisis that needed her attention. But his words echoed long after he disappeared into the crowd. She thought she understood Kendrick's world until she met Sloan Winters, the blonde reminder of why some doors should stay closed. The tech conference ballroom glittered with power and privilege, but Talia felt every I follow her movement through the crowd, not with interest, but with assessment, like they were calculating whether she belonged. She'd come to hear Kendrick speak about digital equality, telling herself it was professional interest. The way her pulse quickened when he took the stage suggested otherwise. He commanded the room effortlessly, speaking about technology as a bridge instead of a barrier, about creating opportunities instead of gatekeeping them. When he mentioned the importance of legal advocates who understood systemic inequality, his eyes found hers across the ballroom, and she felt heat crawl up her neck. Inspiring speech, wasn't it? Talia turned to find a woman beside her. Tall, blonde, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Talia's monthly rent. Diamond bracelet caught the light as she extended a perfectly manicured hand. I am Sloan Winters. And you are. The name hit like a slap. Talia had seen it in dozens of photos with Kendrick. Society pages, charity events, red carpet appearances. This was the ex-mistress, the Upper East Side princess who'd been warming his bed for the past 2 years. Talia Monroe, she replied, shaking Sloane's hand briefly. Monroe. Sloane's smile never reached her eyes. How do you know Kendrick? Professional acquaintance. Ah. The single syllable carried volumes of dismissal. What kind of work do you do? I'm an attorney. How interesting. Sloane's gaze swept over Talia's simple black dress, her modest jewelry, her natural hair. Criminal defense? Divorce? I imagine there's always work in those areas. The casual condescension made Talia's jaw tighten. Corporate law. Discrimination cases. I recently saved someone's company from a very expensive lawsuit. How noble of you. Sloane sipped her champagne, clearly losing interest. Well, it was lovely meeting you, Tracy. Talia, of course. Enjoy the evening. As Sloane glided away toward the stage where Kendrick was finishing his speech, Talia felt something ugly twist her chest. Jealousy was foreign to her, but watching the blonde approach Kendrick with the confidence of ownership made her hands clench. Sloane reached him just as he stepped down from the podium. She placed her hand on his arm, leaning in to whisper something that made him smile. The gesture was possessive, familiar, public, everything Talia would never be. When Kendrick's eyes found hers across the room, she saw the moment he registered her presence. His smile faltered. Sloane followed his gaze, her expression sharpening when she spotted Talia. They approached together, Sloane's hand still on Kendrick's arm, like a claim she wasn't willing to release. Talia, Kendrick's voice was carefully neutral. I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to hear your speech. Very compelling arguments about digital equality. Thank you. He started to say something else, but Sloane interrupted. Darling, shouldn't we head to dinner? The reservation at Daniel is for 8, and you know how they are about punctuality. Darling. The endearment was a dagger wrapped in silk. Actually, Kendrick said, glancing between them, Sloane, I'd like you to meet Talia Monroe. She's the attorney who saved Voss Industries from that discrimination lawsuit. Sloane's eyebrows rose with practiced surprise. Oh my, that was you? How thorough of you. The word choice was deliberate. Not brilliant, not impressive. Thorough, like Talia, was a particularly efficient cleaning service. Yes, Talia replied evenly. Thoroughness tends to work well in legal proceedings. I'm sure it does. Sloane's smile was sharp as glass. Though I suppose corporate law must be quite different from other types of legal work. Less personal, I'd imagine. The implication hung in the air. Corporate law for corporate people. Not messy discrimination cases for people who didn't matter. Kendrick's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Talia specializes in civil rights law. Her work has set legal precedent in housing and employment discrimination. How admirable, Sloane said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Well, darling, we really should. Actually, Talia interrupted, I should be going. Long day tomorrow. She looked directly at Kendrick. Thank you for the speech, Mr. Voss. Very enlightening. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Talia, wait. She paused, not turning around. I'll call you tomorrow. About that foundation we discussed. The foundation, right? Business. Professional interest. Nothing more. Of course, she said without looking back. Looking forward to it. Have you ever been made to feel like an intruder in a space you earned the right to occupy? How did you handle it? That night, Kendrick texted, "I should have introduced you properly." Her response was simple. You should have. But you didn't. 3 dots appeared and disappeared for 20 minutes before her phone went silent. Some conversations, she realized, couldn't happen over text. He showed up at her apartment at midnight with apologies and explanations, but she was done accepting either. Rain streaked her apartment windows as he stood in her doorway. Usually perfect hair disheveled, shirt collar open, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. Water dripped from his jacket onto her welcome mat, and she realized he'd walked here from wherever he'd parked, getting soaked in the process. "It's midnight," she said, not moving from the doorway. "I know. I have court in the morning." "I know that too." His eyes met hers, and she saw something raw in them. Desperation, maybe, or regret. "Can I come in? Please?" Against her better judgment, she stepped aside. He entered her small apartment like he was afraid of taking up too much space, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "You want to explain what happened tonight?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Sloan and I..." He ran a hand through his damp hair. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me guess. You're not together, but you're not together. You care about her, but it's not serious. She's convenient, but you want something real." His face went still. "How did you?" "Because I've heard this story before, Kendrick. Rich man keeps a beautiful woman around for appearances while he tells himself he's looking for something deeper. When he finds it, suddenly the convenient woman becomes complicated. That's not fair, isn't it?" She moved to her kitchen, needing distance between them. "You stood there tonight and let her treat me like hired help. Let her talk down to me like I was some kind of charity case you'd taken an interest in." "I didn't." "You did." The words came out harder than she'd intended. "You introduced me as the attorney like that was all I was to you. A professional service provider. Someone who'd done you a favor." He followed her to the kitchen, and in the small space, she could smell his cologne mixed with rain, could feel the heat radiating from his body despite the wet clothes. "You're right," he said quietly. "I should have handled it differently." "Should have handled what differently?" "The introduction? The dinner? The fact that you're still sleeping with her." "I'm not sleeping with Sloan." She turned to face him, eyebrow raised. "Really? Not for months. We ended things officially in January, but she's..." He struggled for words. "She's connected to my world. Our social circles overlap. She's at every event, every charity function. It's easier to let people think you're still together than to deal with the awkwardness of a clean break." "Yes." The honesty in his voice surprised her. She'd expected denials, excuses, the kind of smooth talk that powerful men use to justify their choices. "And where does that leave me?" she asked. "I don't know." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. "I know where I wanted to leave you, but I don't know if I have the right to ask." "Ask what?" His hand came up to touch her face, fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "Ask you to give me a chance to prove that you're not a complication, that you're not some experiment or curiosity, that what I feel when I look at you is real." Her breath caught. This close, she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could count the rain droplets still clinging to his eyelashes. "What do you feel when you look at me?" she whispered. Terrified, he admitted, "You make me want things I didn't know I was missing. You make me want to be better than I am." His thumb brushed across her bottom lip, and she felt her resolve cracking. This was dangerous territory, the kind of moment that changed everything. "Kendrick, I know you don't trust me. I know I've given you reasons not to, but I'm asking you to let me earn it. Let me show you that you're not second choice or convenient or any of the things Sloan made you feel tonight." "And how exactly would you do that?" "By choosing you. Publicly. Completely. No more complications. No more awkward social situations where you feel invisible." His forehead rested against hers. "I won't be your secret, Talia. I've spent my life being invisible to people who should see me. I won't choose that for myself." The echo of her own words from their coffee meeting hung between them. He'd been listening, really listening. What if I could change? What if I could be the man you deserve publicly, not just privately. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this moment was real, that the heat between them was more than just physical attraction. But she'd been here before, in small ways with smaller men, learning that want and respect were different things. "I need to think," she said. His hand dropped from her face, but he didn't step back. "How long?" "I don't know. Days? Weeks? Years?" Despite everything, she almost smiled. "Impatient, terrified you'll decide, I'm not worth the risk." When is love not enough? When someone wants you privately, but won't claim you publicly, what do? Drop your advice in the comments. As he moved toward the door, she felt something shift inside her chest. Fear, maybe, or recognition. The understanding that some choices couldn't be unmade. As he left, he paused at her door. What if I could change? What if I could be the man you deserve publicly, not just privately? She watched him disappear into the rain, knowing her answer would either save them both or destroy any chance they had. She built walls 3 feet thick around her heart, but Kendrick kept finding windows she forgot to close. Monday morning arrived like a cold slap of reality. Talia sat in her corner office, staring at the stack of contracts that needed her attention, but her mind kept drifting to Saturday night. The rain on her windows, his voice asking if he could change, the way he looked at her before walking away. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kendrick. "Good morning. Hope you had a restful weekend. Professional. Safe." Exactly what she'd asked for. She typed back, "Thank you. The Morrison files are ready for your review." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Of course. I'll send my assistant to collect them." Not him. His assistant. Message received. The law firm's conference room became their battleground over the next 2 weeks. Every meeting was a careful dance of professional courtesy, masking personal tension thick enough to cut. She'd present her findings. He'd nod, take notes, ask relevant questions. Nothing more, but she caught him watching her sometimes. When she turned to write on the whiteboard, she felt his eyes trace the curve of her neck. When she leaned across the table to hand him documents, their fingers would brush for just a second longer than necessary. During one video call, she was explaining intellectual property concerns when she noticed he wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at her, really looking, like he was memorizing her face. "Mr. Voss," she said, "are you following?" He blinked, straightened in his chair. "Yes, absolutely. Continue." But his voice was rougher than usual. "Have you ever wanted someone you knew was bad for you? How do you fight attraction when your head says no, but your heart won't listen?" The real test came 3 weeks later. Talia was reviewing discovery documents when her secretary knocked. "Ms. Monroe, there's a Sloan Winters here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." Talia's stomach dropped. She knew that name. Kendrick's on and off whatever shoes. Sent her in. Sloan Winters walked into her office like she owned it. Blonde hair, perfectly styled, designer, everything. The kind of woman who never had to prove she belonged anywhere. "You must be Talia," Sloan said, settling into the chair across from her desk without being invited. "I've heard so much about you." "Have you?" Talia kept her voice neutral. "What can I do for you, Ms. Winters?" "It's about Kendrick." Sloan crossed her legs, smiled like a shark. "I think there's been some confusion about your role in his life." "My role is legal counsel. Nothing more." "Good." Sloan's smile widened. "Because I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings. Kendrick and I have history. Deep history. The kind that doesn't just disappear because he's temporarily fascinated by something new." Talia felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her expression calm. "Is there a legal matter you need to discuss, Ms. Winters? Because if not, I have work to do." "Actually, yes." Sloan pulled out her phone, showed Talia a screenshot. "I think you should recuse yourself from Kendrick's cases. Conflict of interest, you understand." The screenshot was a photo of Kendrick leaving Talia's apartment building. Taken tonight, he came to apologize. The angle made it look intimate, romantic. "That's interesting," Talia said slowly, "because I don't see how a client visiting his attorney's building creates any conflict." "Don't you?" Sloan's voice turned sharp. "Because I have a feeling the partners at this firm might see it differently, especially if they knew about your little coffee date, your cozy phone calls." Talia leaned back in her chair. This woman was trying to intimidate her, actually trying to threaten her career over a man. "Ms. Winters," she said quietly, "I'm going to give you some free legal advice. What you're describing sounds like harassment, and documentation of harassment tends to reflect poorly on the person doing the harassing, not the victim." Sloane's smile faltered. "Now," Talia continued, "unless you have actual legal business to discuss, I suggest you leave my office. And Ms. Winters, next time you want to play games, make sure you understand the rules first." After Sloane left, Talia sat alone in her office, hands shaking slightly. She picked up her phone, started to call Kendrick, then stopped. If he wanted to handle his ex-girlfriend situation, he could do it himself. She had work to do. But that afternoon, an envelope arrived. Expensive paper, her name written in elegant script. Inside, an invitation to a charity gala. Tech Innovation Leaders VIP reception. At the bottom, handwritten, "I know you won't come, but I had to ask. K." She stared at it for an hour, weighing her options. Going would be walking into enemy territory. Staying home would be letting fear win. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Talia Monroe. "Ms. Monroe, this is Patricia Chun from the New York Times business section. I'm working on a story about women of color in corporate law, and your name came up as someone breaking barriers. Would you be interested in an interview?" Talia looked at the invitation again. Sometimes the best way to handle being invisible was to step directly into the light. "Actually," she said, "I might have something even better for you." She chose her dress like armor, navy silk that whispered power, not seduction, because tonight she was walking into enemy territory. Friday evening, Talia stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the neckline of her dress for the third time. Navy blue, perfectly tailored, expensive enough to belong, but conservative enough to send a message. "I'm not here for your entertainment." Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Maya. "You sure about this? Those people eat lawyers for breakfast." Talia typed back, "Good thing I haven't had breakfast yet." The truth was, she wasn't sure about anything. But Sloane's little visit had changed something in her. She was tired of being treated like she didn't belong in spaces she'd earned the right to occupy. Tired of being polite about other people's discomfort with her presence. Tonight, she was claiming her seat at the table. The Plaza Hotel ballroom dripped with crystal and old money. The kind of elegance that made fortune seem effortless and exclusion feel natural. Talia handed her invitation to the hostess, who looked surprised to see her. "Talia Monroe?" the woman asked, checking her list twice. "That's correct." "Oh, well, welcome to the VIP reception." The way she said it made Talia's jaw tighten, but she smiled anyway. "Thank you." Inside, the room buzzed with conversation and champagne glasses. 300 of New York's tech elite, all networking and name-dropping and pretending their money made them interesting. Talia accepted a glass of wine from a passing waiter and surveyed the crowd. She recognized faces from magazine covers, CEOs whose companies she'd studied, venture capitalists who could fund entire startups with pocket change. And then she saw him. Kendrick stood near the windows, deep in conversation with two men she recognized as Fortune 500 CEOs. He wore a black tuxedo that fit him like it was made specifically for his body, which it probably was. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw clean-shaven, and when he laughed at something one of the men said, she felt that familiar flutter in her stomach. As if sensing her presence, he turned. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a moment, everything else faded. The conversations, the clinking glasses, the ambient music. All of it disappeared until there was just him, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. He excused himself from his conversation and started walking toward her. "You came," he said when he reached her, voice low and warm. "I did." She took a sip of wine, used the moment to steady herself. Surprised, pleasantly, his eyes moved over her dress, appreciation clear in his expression. "You look incredible." "Thank you." They stood there for a moment, the weight of their unfinished conversation from 2 weeks ago hanging between them. "Would you like to meet some people?" he asked. "There are some folks here who'd benefit from knowing you." Before she could answer, a voice cut through the air like a knife. "Kendrick, darling, Sloane Winters appeared beside them in a shimmering gold dress that probably cost more than Talia's monthly rent. She slipped her arm through Kendrick's like she owned him, diamond bracelet catching the light. "I've been looking everywhere for you," Sloane purred, then noticed Talia. "Oh, hello again." "Sloane," Kendrick said, his voice noticeably cooler. "I wasn't expecting you tonight. Weren't you? I'm always your +1 for these things." She tightened her grip on his arm, smiled at Talia. "We have such a routine. Have you ever walked into a room knowing you didn't belong, but refusing to leave? What gave you the strength to stay? Have you ever watched the world choose sides over your life while you're just trying to tell the truth? Drop a comment if you've ever been torn apart by people who don't even know you." Kendrick arrived at her office with a security team and fury in his eyes. "Pack your things. You're staying with me until this dies down." "I'm not running for my own life," she said, but her hands were shaking as she gathered files. "This isn't running. This is surviving long enough to win." That evening, as they sat in his penthouse watching news coverage of their story, Talia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your boyfriend can't protect you forever. Some secrets should stay buried." She showed Kendrick the message. His jaw tightened as he pulled her closer. "Tomorrow we hold a press conference," he said. "No more hiding. No more letting them control the story." But as sirens wailed somewhere in the distance and camera flashes lit up the street below, Talia wondered if telling the truth was worth the price they were both about to pay. They tried to destroy her reputation to save their own, but they underestimated what happens when a brilliant woman has nothing left to lose. The courthouse steps buzzed with energy as reporters packed together like angry wasps. Talia straightened her blazer and checked her reflection in Kendrick's car window one last time. Today would either vindicate everything she'd fought for or destroy her career forever. "Ready?" he asked, taking her hand. "I was born ready for this fight." They walked up those stone steps together, camera flashes exploding around them like small bombs. The crowd pressed closer as microphones thrust toward their faces. "Ms. Monroe, how do you respond to allegations that you've fabricated evidence? Mr. Voss, are you standing by a woman who potentially committed corporate espionage?" Talia stopped at the top of the steps and turned to face the mob of reporters. Kendrick stood beside her, not behind her, not in front of her, but exactly beside her like an equal partner. "3 weeks ago, I revealed evidence of systematic discrimination in the tech industry," she began, her voice carrying over the crowd without a microphone. "Since then, I've been called a liar, a gold digger, and a criminal. My apartment has been vandalized. My mother has received death threats. Reporters have followed my elderly neighbors, demanding they share dirt about my character." The crowd quieted, drawn in by her steady tone. But here's what they can't dispute. Every document is real. Every recording is authentic. Every email has metadata proving its origin. She pulled out a thick folder. "Today, I'm releasing additional evidence that shows this conspiracy went deeper than anyone imagined." Gasps rippled through the crowd as she held up internal memos discussing plans to clean house a minority employees across multiple companies. When powerful people feel threatened, they attack the messenger instead of addressing the message, Talia continued. "They've spent 3 weeks trying to destroy my reputation because they can't destroy my evidence." A reporter shouted, "What about allegations that you seduced Mr. Voss to gain access to confidential files?" Kendrick stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Talia Monroe saved my company because she's brilliant, not because she's beautiful, though she happens to be both." His hand found hers. Any man lucky enough to earn her love would be a fool to let public opinion change that. The chemistry between them was electric, obvious to everyone watching. This wasn't a business partnership. This was 2 people who'd found something real in the middle of chaos. "Ms. Monroe," another reporter called. "How do you respond to critics who say you're just seeking attention?" Talia's laugh was sharp and genuine. "Attention? You think I wanted death threats and paparazzi following my mother to church? You think I enjoyed having strangers analyze my dating history on cable news?" Her voice rose with passion. "I wanted justice. I wanted accountability. I wanted other people who look like me to know they don't have to suffer in silence. When is staying quiet actually complicity? When does protecting yourself become protecting the system that hurts others? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. As they walked into the courthouse, Talia felt Kendrick's hand squeeze hers. Inside these walls, a judge would decide whether her evidence was legitimate or if she destroyed her career for nothing. 3 hours later, they emerged victorious. All charges dismissed. The discrimination case validated. 3 executives resigned in disgrace. But as they stood on those courthouse steps again, surrounded by supporters cheering their victory, Talia leaned close to Kendrick's ear. "I'm pregnant." His eyes went wide, then soft, then fierce with protection. The biggest battle was over, but their most important chapter was just beginning. She fought a public battle and won. Now she was fighting a private war with morning sickness and the fear of bringing a child into the chaos they'd created. The doctor's office felt like sacred ground as the heartbeat filled the small room, rapid and strong, like its mother. Talia gripped Kendrick's hand as they stared at the ultrasound screen showing their baby's first photo. 12 weeks along, Dr. Martinez said with a smile, "Everything looks perfect. Perfect. Nothing in their lives had been perfect lately. But this tiny person growing inside her seemed determined to be their miracle anyway." Walking out of the clinic, Talia pulled her jacket tighter against the October wind. "Are you ready for this?" she asked Kendrick. "Really ready? Because there's no going back." He stopped walking and cupped her face in his hands. "Talia, I've been ready for a family with you since the day you told me I wasn't good enough to date you." His smile was soft and sure. This baby is going to have parents who fought for what's right, who stood up to bullies, who chose love over convenience. That's not chaos, that's courage. But as they reached his car, cameras started flashing. Paparazzi had been waiting, tipped off by someone inside the medical building. "Talia, is it true you're pregnant?" "Kendrick, when's the wedding? Are you using this baby to secure your relationship?" Kendrick moved protectively in front of her, his jaw tight with anger. "Back off. Now." The photographers kept shooting as they drove away, and Talia felt her stomach clench. Not from morning sickness, but from the realization that their child would grow up in this fishbowl they created. That evening, curled up in Kendrick's penthouse, she rested her head on his chest while he read pregnancy books on his tablet. The domesticity felt surreal after months of courtroom battles and public scrutiny. "I want to disappear," she said quietly. "Just for a while. Before we become parents, before the media finds new ways to invade our privacy, I want to remember who we are when nobody's watching." His hand moved to her still flat stomach, gentle and possessive. "Where do you want to go?" "Somewhere nobody cares about viral moments or billion-dollar lawsuits. Somewhere we can just be us." 2 weeks later, they were walking hand in hand on a private beach in Martha's Vineyard. The October air was crisp, but the sun warmed their faces as waves crashed against the shore. No cameras, no reporteros, no one shouting questions about their relationship or their future. Just them and the baby growing between them. "I love you like this," Kendrick said, watching her pick up seashells with childlike wonder. No armor, no walls, no audience to perform for. She turned to face him, wind whipping her curls around her face. "This is who I really am. Not the fierce lawyer or the scandal survivor. Just me." He pulled her close, hands settling on her waist where their baby was growing. "Then marry me, not for the cameras or the public statement, but because I want to build a family with the real you." The proposal wasn't dramatic or public. No ring yet, no crowd to witness. Just a man asking a woman to share the rest of their ordinary, extraordinary days together. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "But I want something small, private, just us and the people who actually matter." That night, they made love slowly, carefully, with new reverence for the life growing inside her. Every touch was gentle, every kiss a promise about the future they were building together. Have you ever found peace in the middle of chaos? When the world is watching, how do you protect what's most precious to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As they fell asleep tangled together in the beach house bed, Talia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the baby." Some secrets are worth protecting. She deleted the message without showing Kendrick. Some battles were over. Some were just beginning. But for tonight, in this bed, with his hand on her stomach and their future growing inside her, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Complete peace. They fled to Martha's Vineyard where nobody cared about viral moments or billion-dollar companies. Just a man, a woman, and the family they were building. The beach house overlooked endless ocean, waves washing away footprints like the world washing away everything that didn't matter. For 6 weeks, they lived like regular people. Kendrick cooked breakfast while Talia battled morning sickness. She read case files while he worked on his laptop, both of them stealing glances across their makeshift office at the kitchen table. "Your stomach's showing," he said one morning, watching her struggle to button her jeans. She looked down at the small bump that had appeared seemingly overnight. "I need bigger clothes. You need a ring first." He dropped to one knee right there in the kitchen, coffee still brewing, morning light streaming through salt-stained windows. The ring was simple, a solitaire diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the wall. "Talia Monroe, will you marry me for real this time? Not because the world is watching, but because I can't imagine my life without you and this baby we made together." Her yes came through tears and laughter, and when he slipped the ring on her finger, it felt like the first real moment they'd shared since that night at the gala. "I want to get married here," she said, looking out at the ocean. "On the beach. Just us and whoever you need to make it legal. Your mother, my mother, the efficient, and maybe someone to take pictures so our baby can see how happy we were." Planning a wedding for 3 people was easier than planning a press conference for 300. They bought flowers from a local shop, found a minister who specialized in beach ceremonies, and hired a photographer who promised to keep their location private. The night before their wedding, they walked the shoreline holding hands, her small bump visible beneath the flowing dress she'd chosen. "Are you scared?" she asked. Terrified, he admitted, "Not of marrying you, of being good enough for you, of being the father this baby deserves." She stopped walking and faced him, moonlight turning the water silver behind them. "You want to know what scared me most about falling in love with you?" "What?" "That you'd see me clearly and decide I wasn't worth the trouble." Her voice was soft, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed. "That all the fighting and controversy and drama would make you realize your life was better before I complicated it." He kissed her then, deep and sure, tasting salt air and promises on her lips. "You didn't complicate my life, Talia. You completed it." They made love that night with gentle passion, her changing body soft and warm beneath his hands. Every touch was worship, every whisper a vow they'd repeat officially in the morning. "I love you," he breathed against her neck as she moved above him, moonlight painting her skin silver. "I love you too," she gasped, finding the rhythm that sent them both over the edge together. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright. Talia's mother cried as she walked her daughter across the sand. The minister kept the ceremony short and sweet. The photographer captured every smile, every tear, every moment of joy as they promised to love each other through whatever came next. When Kendrick kissed his bride, waves crashed against the shore like applause from the ocean itself. Sometimes we need to disappear to remember who we really are. When did you find your truest self? In public or in private? Tell me in the comments below. Later, as they danced to music from his phone on their private beach, Talia felt their baby kick for the first time. She grabbed Kendrick's hand and pressed it against her stomach. "Did you feel that?" His eyes went wide as a tiny foot pushed against his palm. "That's our baby. That's our baby," she agreed. And for the first time in months, the future felt perfect instead of uncertain. They had each other. They had their love. They had their child on the way. Everything else was just noise. 1 year after he kissed her hand in front of hundreds, he kissed her lips in front of 3. And somehow the smaller audience made the bigger promise. The delivery room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitors and Talia's labored breathing. Kendrick held her hand as another contraction hit, watching his wife transform into something fierce and primal and absolutely magnificent. "I can see the head," Dr. Martinez announced. "One more push, Talia." She bore down with everything she had, and suddenly the room filled with the sharp, demanding cry of their daughter, announcing her arrival to the world. "She's perfect," the doctor said, placing the tiny, slippery baby on Talia's chest. Their daughter had Kendrick's dark hair and Talia's determined expression, even at 2 minutes old. She opened her eyes and seemed to look directly at her parents with an intensity that made them both laugh through their tears. "Hi, baby girl," Talia whispered, still breathless from labor. "I'm your mama." Kendrick touched one tiny fist with his finger, overwhelmed by how something so small could make him feel so complete. "And I'm your daddy. We've been waiting for you." They named her Zara Michelle Voss. Zara meaning blooming flower, and Michelle after Talia's mother, who'd fought her own battles with grace and dignity. 6 weeks later, Talia sat in the nursery at 3 a.m., feeding their daughter while Kendrick slept. The room glowed with soft light from a moon-shaped lamp, and she could hear the city humming quietly outside their windows. "Your daddy kissed my hand in front of all those people," she whispered to Zara, who was nursing contentedly. "Everyone had an opinion about us. Some people thought I was using him for money. Some thought he was using me for publicity. But we knew something they didn't. We were building something real." Zara's tiny hand curled around Talia's finger, and she felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. "You're going to grow up knowing your worth," she continued softly. "You're going to understand that respect isn't something you earn by making yourself smaller. It's something you demand by knowing exactly who you are." Kendrick appeared in the doorway, hair messy from sleep, watching his girls with wonder. Midnight feeding? She was hungry, just like her mama, never patient when she wants something. He settled beside them on the glider, wrapping his arms around both his wife and daughter. "I love watching you with her. You're exactly the mother I knew you'd be." "What kind of mother is that?" "Fierce, protective, uncompromising about what she deserves." He kissed Talia's temple. "You're teaching her dignity by living it." As Zara finished eating and drifted back to sleep, Talia leaned against Kendrick's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Do you ever think about that night at the gala?" she asked. "Every day. Best decision I ever made." Even with everything that came after, the threats, the media, the legal battles, especially because of everything that came after, his voice was certain. "We proved that love isn't about rescue. It's about recognition. I didn't save you, Talia. I just finally got smart enough to see what was already there." She tilted her head to look at him. What was already there? A woman who knew her value even when the world told her she didn't have any. A fighter who chose dignity over desperation. The mother of my child and the love of my life. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep, both thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From that first phone call to this quiet moment in their nursery, every battle, every victory, every choice that had led them to this perfect peace. What would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed in it yourself? Would you run? Or would you build something that lasts? Comment below with what you would have done in her shoes. As dawn broke over New York City, painting their nursery in shades of gold and pink, Zara stirred in her sleep and made a soft sound that might have been contentment. "She's dreaming," Kendrick whispered. "What do you think she's dreaming about?" "The same thing we are," Talia said, looking at her husband and daughter with complete satisfaction. "A future where she never has to choose between love and respect, because she'll know she deserves both." If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Tell me in the comments what aspect of their journey affected you most. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It honors the strength that was there all along. Talia felt every eye in their immediate vicinity turned toward them. The whispers started, subtle but audible. "Isn't that the lawyer who? Heard she's been working on. Never seen her at one of these before." Sloane's smile grew wider. She was enjoying this. The attention, the speculation, the obvious discomfort. "Well," Sloane said, voice carrying just loud enough for nearby conversations to pause, "this is cozy. Kendrick, you didn't tell me you were bringing guests." I didn't bring anyone, Kendrick said carefully. Ms. Monroe received her own invitation. Did she? Sloane's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. How interesting. The tension was becoming visible now. Other guests were openly staring, phones discreetly appearing to capture whatever was about to happen. Talia set down her wine glass, straightened her shoulders. She'd walked into this knowing it might get ugly. She just hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I should mingle." She started to walk away, but Sloane's voice followed her. "Oh, you brought the help?" 3 words changed everything. "You brought the help?" The room fell silent, and Talia's world stopped spinning. The crystal chandelier above seemed to dim as every conversation died. 300 of New York's elite suddenly focused on one horrible moment that would define everything. Talia froze mid-step. The words hit her like a physical blow, but she didn't turn around. Not yet. She needed a second to compose herself, to decide how to respond to being reduced to nothing in front of everyone who mattered in this industry. Behind her, she heard Kendrick's sharp intake of breath. "Sloane." "What?" Sloane's voice carried across the now silent room, innocent and sweet. "I just assumed. I mean, she's not exactly your usual type, is she? Have you ever been publicly humiliated? How did you find the strength to respond with grace instead of anger?" Talia turned slowly, her face a mask of calm professionalism. Every lesson her mother had taught her about dignity, every moment she'd practiced keeping her composure in hostile environments, had prepared her for this. "Actually," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I'm Talia Monroe, senior partner at Morrison, Hayes & Associates. I specialize in intellectual property and corporate defense law." The room was so quiet you could hear champagne bubbles popping in glasses. Sloane's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Of course you are. How ambitious." The word ambitious dripped with condescension. The implication was clear to everyone listening. Ambitious meant she didn't know her place. "Yes," Talia agreed pleasantly. "Very ambitious, especially when it comes to protecting my clients from discrimination lawsuits." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several people shifted uncomfortably. In rooms like this, everyone had something to hide, some policy or practice that wouldn't survive legal scrutiny. Sloane's face went pale. She knew exactly what case Talia was referencing, the one that had saved Kendrick's company and could have destroyed several others. "How fascinating," Sloane said, her voice tighter now. "And here I thought you were just another charity case Kendrick was helping." The insult was so blatant, so deliberately cruel, that several people in the crowd actually gasped. Talia felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd been called worse by better people. The key was not to sink to their level. "Charity case?" Talia repeated thoughtfully. "That's interesting, because in my experience, charity usually flows from those who have to those who have not." And looking around this room, she gestured elegantly at the opulent surroundings. "I'd say I'm in excellent company when it comes to people who've earned what they have." More murmurs. A few people actually smiled. Sloane's face was turning red now. "You little..." "Sloane." Kendrick's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He'd been silent through the entire exchange, and Talia had started to wonder if he was going to defend her at all. But when she looked at him, she saw something that made her breath catch. His jaw was set, his eyes were blazing, and he looked angrier than she'd ever seen him. He stood slowly, every eye in the room tracking his movement. The silence was deafening. Talia held her breath, knowing this moment would reveal exactly who he was, and whether everything she'd hoped about him was true or just another fantasy. Cameras were appearing now, phones held discreetly but obviously. Whatever happened next would be recorded, shared, analyzed. Kendrick took a step toward Talia, then another. When he reached her, he did something no one expected. He took her hand. The room seemed to collectively lean forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kendrick said, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, "I'd like you to meet Talia Monroe." He lifted her hand toward his lips, the gesture slow and deliberate. "This woman," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "saved my company from a discrimination lawsuit, that could have destroyed everything I've built. He pressed his lips to her knuckles, the kiss soft but unmistakably public. She did it pro bono, working nights and weekends, because she believed in justice more than profit. Camera flashes exploded like lightning around them. She's brilliant, principled, and the finest legal mind I've ever encountered. He straightened, still holding her hand. And anyone who mistakes her for the help clearly doesn't understand what excellence looks like. The room erupted. Some people applauded. Others whispered frantically. Phones buzzed with notifications as photos and videos began uploading to social media in real time. Sloane stood frozen, her face white with shock and humiliation. Talia stared at Kendrick, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "Kendrick," she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. "I should have done this weeks ago." As applause filled the ballroom and cameras captured every angle, Talia felt something shift inside her chest. This was what she'd asked for: public respect, open acknowledgement, the end of being anyone's secret. But walking out together into the night, she whispered, "You know this changes everything, right?" His response would determine their future. "I'm counting on it." He kissed her hand like a king crowning a queen, and 300 witnesses watched a love story rewrite itself in real time. The Plaza Hotel lobby buzzed with aftershock energy as guests filtered out of the ballroom, everyone talking at once. Talia and Kendrick stood near the entrance, still holding hands, while chaos swirled around them. Sir. A reporter pushed through the crowd, camera crew behind him. "Can you comment on your relationship with Ms. Monroe?" "Not tonight," Kendrick said firmly, steering Talia toward the exit. But there was no escaping it. Phones were everywhere, flashes going off, people calling out questions. "Ms. Monroe, how long have you been dating Kendrick Voss? Is it true you saved his company? What's your response to the discrimination allegations?" Talia's head was spinning. An hour ago, she was a lawyer at a charity gala. Now she was apparently the other woman in some tech billionaire love triangle. Kendrick's car was waiting at the curb, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. His driver held the door open as they escaped the chaos. Inside the quiet car, Talia finally breathed. "That was—" she started, then stopped. She didn't have words. "Overdue," Kendrick finished. "That was long overdue." She turned to look at him in the dim light from the street lamps they passed. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "Yes." His voice was certain. "I finally told the truth." Her phone was buzzing constantly in her purse. Text messages, missed calls, email notifications. The outside world was very interested in what had happened tonight. "Kendrick, I need you to understand something," she said carefully. "I'm not built for this. The cameras, the attention, the speculation. That's not who I am." "I know." He reached for her hand again. "But you are built for being respected, for being seen for who you really are instead of who people assume you are. When someone finally chooses you publicly after wanting you privately, how does that feel? Share your thoughts about public validation versus private love." They rode in comfortable silence for a few blocks before Talia spoke again. "What about Sloane?" Kendrick's jaw tightened. "What about her? She's not going to just disappear. You embarrassed her in front of everyone. She embarrassed herself." His voice was cold. "What she said to you was unforgivable, but she's been part of your life for years. You're go-to date for events like this." Kendrick turned to face her fully. "Talia, Sloane was never my girlfriend. She was convenient, available when I needed someone for public appearances, undemanding when it came to actual intimacy or commitment. And what am I?" The question hung between them as the car pulled up to her building. "You," he said quietly, "are the woman I should have been brave enough to claim months ago." They sat in the car outside her apartment, neither moving to get out. "This changes everything," she said again. Everything needed a change. Her phone buzzed with another text. She glanced at it, a screenshot from Instagram. The hand kiss, captured in perfect detail, already shared thousands of times. "By morning, we'll be trending," she said. "Probably. People will have opinions about us. About me. Let them." She looked at him, this man who'd just appended his carefully controlled public image for her. "Are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once we walk through that door together, there's no going back to professional distance and polite text messages. Instead of answering with words, he leaned across the seat and kissed her. Not the gentle hand kiss from the ballroom, but a real kiss. Deep and certain and full of promises. When they broke apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've never been more sure of anything," he whispered. They made it to her apartment door before her phone started ringing. "Unknown number." "Don't answer it," Kendrick said, but she was already looking at the caller ID. Her mother's number. "I have to," she said, answering the call. Mom. "Baby girl." Her mother's voice was excited. "You're on the news. That man kissed your hand on live television." Talia looked at Kendrick, who was grinning now. "Yeah, Mom," she said. "He did." As applause filled the ballroom and cameras captured every angle, Talia felt something shift inside her chest. But walking out together into the night, she whispered, "You know this changes everything, right?" His response would determine their future. "I'm counting on it." The next morning would bring viral fame, media scrutiny, and consequences neither of them could predict. But tonight, in the quiet of her apartment with his arms around her, everything felt exactly as it should be. By morning, they were trending on 3 platforms. #HandKissHeard, #TechBossLove, and #SheDeservedThat. But fame came with a price neither expected. Talia's phone buzzed relentlessly on a nightstand, notifications lighting up the dark bedroom like a digital thunderstorm. She reached for it with one eye open, then immediately regretted it. 847 missed calls, 2,356 text messages, 15,672 Instagram notifications. "Oh my God," she whispered. Beside her, Kendrick stirred. "What time is it?" 7 a.m. "And we're famous." She showed him the screen. His eyebrows shot up. "That's more than I expected." Talia scrolled through the notifications. The hand kiss video had been shared 50,000 times on Twitter alone. TikTok was even worse. Someone had set it to music, and it was approaching 1 million views. The comments were a mix of supportive and savage. "This is what it looks like when a man chooses you publicly. She's gorgeous and brilliant. Good for him. Gold digger alert. Y'all really think this is real? It's all for show." The way he looked at her, though, smiling face with hard eyes. Would you want your love story to go viral? Is public support worth the loss of privacy? Tell me in the comments. Kendrick's phone was ringing now. He glanced at the screen and declined the call. "My publicist," he explained. "She's probably having a heart attack. Should you answer?" Eventually, he pulled Talia closer. But not yet. They spent the morning reading comments together, both fascinated and horrified by the instant analysis of their relationship. People were dissecting everything. Her dress, his body language, the look on Sloane's face. "Listen to this one," Talia said, reading from her phone. "The power dynamic here is concerning. Rich white man saves poor black woman. Classic savior complex." Kendrick frowned. "They don't know anything about us." "No, but they think they do." She kept scrolling. "Oh, this one's nice. She handled that racist comment with such grace. Queen behavior." Her regular phone rang. She recognized the number, her law firm. "I should take this," she said. "Talia." It was Richard Morrison, the senior partner. "We need to talk." An hour later, Talia sat in the law firm's conference room, facing the 3 senior partners. She dressed carefully, conservative suit, minimal jewelry, all business. "So," Richard said, folding his hands on the table, "you're dating Kendrick Voss." "That's a recent development," she said carefully. "Recent enough that it doesn't create a conflict of interest with his ongoing legal matters. Recent enough that I'm prepared to recuse myself from his cases if necessary." The partners exchanged glances. "Talia," said Patricia Hayes, the only woman among them, "this puts us in a difficult position. The media attention, the speculation about your relationship with a client." "I understand your concerns," Talia said, "but I've done nothing unethical. My work on Mr. Voss's cases was exemplary, and any personal relationship developed after the professional work was complete. Still," Richard said, "perception matters in this business." Talia felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. "Whose perception are we worried about?" Because if it's about whether I can continue to represent clients effectively, my track record speaks for itself. Of course, Patricia said quickly. We're not questioning your competence. Then what are we questioning? Silence fell over the room. Finally, Richard spoke. We're suggesting you take some time off. Let the media attention die down. Then we can reassess. Talia stared at him. You're benching me because my boyfriend is famous. We're protecting the firm's reputation and sacrificing mine in the process. She stood up, gathered her things. I'll clean out my office this afternoon, she said. Talia, you don't have to. Yes, she said. I do. Walking out of that conference room, she felt lighter than she had in years. Some doors needed to be closed before better ones could open. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kendrick. How did it go? She typed back. Time for a career change. You free for lunch? His response was immediate. Always. For you always. Among hundreds of interview requests in her email, one stood out, from a documentary crew wanting to tell their story. What do you think? Kendrick asked when she showed him. Her answer would surprise them both. I think it's time people knew what really happened in that boardroom. She agreed to tell their story publicly, but some truths have consequences no one sees coming, especially when powerful people want them buried. The documentary crew turned Talia's law office into something that felt like a confession booth. Bright lights blazed down on her mahogany desk, while cameras captured every angle of her face. She'd agreed to this interview knowing it would expose more than just her love story with Kendrick. Tell us about the discrimination case, the producer said, leaning forward. The one that brought you and Mr. Voss together. Talia's fingers traced the edge of a manila folder thick with evidence. Inside were emails, recorded phone calls, and testimony that could destroy 3 careers and possibly more. It wasn't just discrimination, she said quietly. It was systematic intimidation designed to force out every black employee in Kendrick's company. The camera zoomed closer as she opened the folder. They had a spreadsheet. Names, departments, fake performance reviews created specifically to justify terminations. They called it culture optimization. Kendrick sat in the corner of the room, watching her reveal secrets that could have stayed buried forever. His company was safe now, but the people who'd tried to destroy it from within were still out there, still powerful, still dangerous. Why come forward now? The interviewer pressed. Because that night at the gala, when Sloan Winters asked if he brought the help, she wasn't being cruel. She was being honest about how these people see someone like me. Talia's voice never wavered. I spent months saving a company where executives joked about hiring diversity hires just to meet quotas, then finding ways to push them out. The revelation hit like lightning. These weren't just personal attacks. This was institutional racism with paper trails and recorded evidence. After the cameras stopped rolling, Kendrick pulled her close. You know what this means, right? They'll come after you with everything they have. She melted into his arms, feeling the weight of what she just unleashed. Let them try. I'm not that scared girl hiding in conference rooms anymore. That night, they made love with desperate intensity, knowing their quiet bubble was about to burst. His hands mapped every curve of her body like he was memorizing her, storing up these peaceful moments before the storm hit. Whatever happens, he whispered against her neck, we face it together. Together, she agreed, pulling him deeper. The documentary aired on a Tuesday night. By Wednesday morning, #corporate racism was trending nationwide. Cable news picked up the story. 3 major news networks called for interviews. Then the threat started. Her office phone rang at 6 a.m. You think you're so smart, don't you? The voice was disguised electronic. Smart girls who don't know their place sometimes have accidents. Talia hung up and immediately called Kendrick. We need security. Now. Within hours, her apartment building was swarming with reporters and photographers. Some held supportive signs. Others shouted questions designed to provoke her into saying something they could twist. Ms. Monroe, is it true you slept with Kendrick Voss to get access to confidential information? How much did competing companies pay you to destroy his business? The lies spread faster than wildfire. By noon, trending hashtags included #gold digger and #corporate espionage alongside justice for Talia.